joining us this morning. Tuesday, it's a glorious Tuesday morning, and we're really fortunate this time to have, of course, no less than the Secretary of Budget and Management, Secretary Florencio Butch. Give him a big hand. I also like to acknowledge, of course, his better half, Deputy Speaker Enedina Abad. And of course, we're also fortunate to have with us Lloyd and Nicholas Lewis, as always. Maraming salamat po. Well, I presume some of you were here last week, and we had ex-President Fidel Ramos and in the live exchange, and we spoke about issues and challenges which have been in the headlines of Philippine media, as well as, of course, social media here. And of course, we're talking about issues like the peace process in BBL, the West Philippine Sea, and we spoke also about land reform, among others, right? And I think the 2016 elections. Well, this time, we're really happy that Secretary Abad agreed to at least have an exchange of views with the community. He will start first with a presentation on his platform of good governance and administration, of course, under the term of President Noynoy Aquino. At the same time, you know, Secretary Abad is not really new to governance and I would say public administration. He served as Secretary of Agrarian Reform and also Education before. So he has been around in the cabinet, I would say. And you know, one of his initiatives, I just want to make sure I got it correct. I think it's the multilateral initiative, Open Government Partnership. I remember I was very new here in New York in 2011, September 2011, when we had that. I think it was at Google here in New York that we launched it, and of course Secretary Abad was there together with the President. And of course, as you all know, he was the President of the Liberal Party. Yeah, so maybe he has his own insights on 2016. You might be interested. It's less than a year away, so you might be interested in asking him questions. But nevertheless, he's here primarily to brief us on all the accomplishments of the Aquino administration, particularly in governance, transparency, and of course, open government. So without much ado, I'd like to welcome again to make his presentation, Secretary Butch.
Thank you, Mario. I was here last month for the IMF World Bank spring meetings, and you know, coming over to the US, I always manage to stop by New York because we have a project here. Actually, been going around and finding ways to help our embassies, not just preserve our properties, but making sure that we get you know, optimum use for them, and supporting our embassies, especially in key cities of the world. By the way, I also have with us here my youngest daughter, Patsy. Actually, yeah, of course you don't have it here, but if you have a 200 peso bill, there is a photo there of the GMA taking her OT for a young girl. She was that young girl by some accident. We are actually also on our way to Boston. One of my sons is graduating from business school, so it's also a celebration for us. But certainly, this is a great opportunity and certainly an honor to be before you to discuss with you key issues confronting the country, as well as very positive developments that are happening. As you all know, our country's progress is one that you must have been keenly observing from year to year. Of course, here in New York, your attention is divided between what's happening in the U.S. I'm sure also Lloyd is already beginning to campaign for our candidate. And then, of course, what's happening in the Philippines. For some of you, the work that you're very busy with has given you little time to check out news back home, so I'm sure you appreciate visits from people like us now and then. And I'd like to think that being away has not, though, weakened your interest and love for our country. If anything, I think the distance may have intensified your connection to the country you all grew up in. In the country you now represent from this particular side of the world. So you might ask the question, and exactly what is going on in the Philippines right now. As a fairly young democracy, our country has seen its own share of setbacks and triumphs. History hasn't always been on our side. Over the last century, we've had to survive wars, a brutal dictatorship, political crisis, and the devastation brought about by a host of disasters and calamities. Complicating all of this was a bureaucratic culture so corrupt, and a society that favored the rich and the powerful while offering little hope to the poor and to those living in the margins. Since 2010, however, things began changing. Slowly at first, then quickly and steadily over the last 3 years. And these changes, I'm pleased to say, have been positive and far-reaching. And the progress we've witnessed over the last 4 years has followed a pace unmatched in our recent history. We all know about the Philippines' reputation as, when we came in, the sick man of Asia. We remember with regret the times when our country wasted our chances for progress, so that we found ourselves lagging behind the neighbors we once overshadowed in the 60s. Now, however, the Philippines is singing a different tune. And it's a tune made stronger by credible voices in the international community. Since President Aquino came into office, we've made a lot of headway in our bid for better governance and socio-economic progress. And the speed and stability of the country's growth has transformed us into Asia's brightest spot. Earlier this year, for example, Bloomberg announced that the Philippines is now the second fastest growing economy in the world, and will be so for the next year. Last month, the Center for Global Development, a think tank based in DC, ranked the country's economy as the most resilient, ready to withstand external shocks and protect itself from the volatility of the global market. And just last week, the Wall Street Journal featured the Philippines, noting that the country has consistently outpaced its neighbors, with growth levels rivaled only by China. The good news is loud and clear. The Philippines is no longer the sick man of Asia. As Bloomberg boldly announced this year, the country has overhauled itself to become Southeast Asia's strong man, blazing a new trail of development ahead of its neighbors. And amid such encouraging news, one can't help but wonder what made all of this possible, and how can we work together so we can build an even better Philippines. What is puzzling to some development analysts is this: how is the Philippine economy doing so well when we haven't made drastic changes to our economic policies? Broad and swift economic growth, the kind we've seen in the Philippines, is usually the result of an extensive campaign for structural, economic, and political reform. True, We've been able to manage the budget so we can spend more on social and economic services and public infrastructure. But we've only just been starting to rev up manufacturing production in the country. We haven't been in this game long enough to see such dramatic results in our economy. I think the answer lies in both the uniqueness of the Aquino administration's development agenda and the very character of President Aquino himself. To understand this, we must go back to the beginning of the administration's story, when then Senator Benigno S. Aquino ran for president in the 2010 elections. For the first time in the country's history, we saw a presidential candidate fight for transparent, accountable, and citizen-oriented governance. Until then, government corruption was a serious problem that our leaders either mutely acknowledged or worse, actively participated in. President Aquino's dedicated campaign for good governance was a necessary one, and curiously enough, almost unheard of for a presidential candidate. After all, the problem of corruption had already set such deep roots in the Philippine bureaucracy. Mention corruption and the public responds with resigned frustration. I'm sure that at one point or another, we've all thought that the Philippine government will always be corrupt. Our bureaucracy, we think, will always be a hopeless hive of thievery and inefficiency. Yet here was a president willing and prepared to challenge those beliefs. His campaign's battle cry, "Kung walang corrupt, walang mahirap," did not just offer a fresh perspective and solution to the country's ills. It offered hope to a citizenry that had grown cynical towards the government and country's own prospects for growth. More significantly, our anti-corruption and good governance agenda wasn't just lip service. It was actually anchored in the president's character. Here finally was a leader of integrity, fierce determination, and trustworthiness. The people responded in kind, throwing its support behind a candidate who showed an unwavering commitment to serve the public's best interests, all in the foundation of transparent, accountable, and engaged citizenry. Now, almost 5 years later, President Aquino continues to enjoy unprecedented trust and approval ratings among Filipinos. This isn't blind allegiance among our fellow men. Instead, it is warranted by the way this administration committed itself to improving the government. The people's trust in President Aquino is justified by the fact that more Filipinos, particularly the poor and marginalized, now have a real shot at improving their quality of life. And this is what changed in the Philippines. This is what made so much progress possible in the span of just 5 odd years. Good governance, buttressed by a sound economic development plan, was the fuel for the kind of progress that has earned for our country the praise and admiration of the international community. It appears, and with strong basis, that under President Aquino, we were able to unlock growth and usher in a period of immense change in the Philippines. The tide has turned for our country, and the tide is finally turning in our favor. Let's take a look at some of the numbers that illustrate just how far we have come, thanks largely to our movement for better governance. Our country has consistently outdone its neighbors in the ASEAN in terms of economic development. In 2013, our GDP growth culminated at 7.2%, while 2014 saw us peaking at 6.1%, still ahead of other South Asian countries. But our story doesn't restrict itself to macroeconomics. What about what's happening on the ground? How are we addressing the needs of our citizens and supporting government services? It's quite simple. The Aquino administration, through proper and transformational leadership, has managed to make more funds available so we can accommodate the development requirements of our country. For instance, Our budget for socioeconomic initiatives has increased year after year, a feat we acknowledge while scaling back the country's debt burden. This is noteworthy because this means that more of our public funds are now being channeled towards the people. For the first time in decades, we are no longer pouring large sums into settling our debts. Instead, we're giving real priority to our people's needs. As a result, poverty levels in the country have been dropping since 2012, registering a new low of 24.9% in 2013. Unemployment figures have likewise dropped to just 6%, which is the lowest it's been in 10 years. What's so extraordinary about these trends is that we've been able to catalyze them without burdening the people with new taxes, with the exception, of course, of the sin tax reform. All it took really was a fervent and tireless campaign for better tax collection in government. You know, when we started, we were collecting something like ₱1 trillion in taxes. At the end of 2014, we were collecting 1.7 trillion in taxes. That's about 70%. And of course, a more prudent, strategic way of managing public funds. Good governance also demanded that we plant the seeds of lasting peace in a country that for so long, 40 years, was unable to resolve the armed conflict tearing down Mindanao. Last year, the Philippines made history with the signing of the Bangsamoro Peace Agreement between the government and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, signaling the beginning of genuine peace after 2 decades of negotiations. By the way, last week, the House Committee the ad hoc committee on BBL passed the BBL, and just this afternoon, the Committee on Appropriations also passed the appropriations provisions of the BBL. So the BBL is going to the floor next week for a floor debate. And well, Congresswoman Abad is here, who's been one of those leading the debates on this, and they're positive that the House will pass the BBL. That should put more pressure on the Senate to pass their version. Heartened by the Aquino administration's sincerity in reforming the bureaucracy and cultivating a favorable business environment, foreign investors have started to take their business to our shores. When we started out in 2010, foreign direct investments amounted to just around $1 billion. By the end of last year, however, FDIs for 2014 shot up to $6.2 billion. This 66% increase over 2013 allowed us to outgun our Southeast Asian neighbors, so that FDIs in the Philippines were the fastest growing in the region and the 4th fastest in the world. In fact, yesterday, the Economist Intelligence Service Bureau named the Philippines as the country most prepared to receive public-private partnership investments. In fact, public-private partnerships likewise burgeoned under President Aquino's leadership. To date, if you look at the total number of PPPs, you put them all together in the previous administration, it's numbered about 6. In the 4 years of President Aquino, the government has already begun implementing a total of 11 PPP projects, more than the total of the number of initiatives under the previous administration. Our successes were certainly not lost on the global community, which has tracked the country's progress with growing interest. Credit rating agencies have hiked up our status to investment grade, which we have been able to maintain over the last year. Our governance reforms have won widespread recognition, including a gold medal award from the Open Government Partnership, which was handed by President Obama himself last year, September. I couldn't come, but Secretary Suleiman was here, for our groundbreaking bottom-up budgeting program, as well as strong performance in governance ratings across various indicators. Look, I'd just like to show you the rate by which we have leaped in terms of this global benchmark. For example, the anti-corruption index, we've jumped 49 places. We overtook 49 countries, and we're the best performing country in that area. And so with World Bank's ease of doing business, we have also leaped 49 places. One of the best performing. In the World Economic Forum's Global Competitiveness Index, we've jumped 33 places, and we're the country that's done the best insofar as competitiveness. But take a look at institutions, because that's, Philippines has been criticized for very weak public institutions, easily subject to capture by vested interests. I think the firm leadership of President Aquino has brought a lot of improvements. That's 58 places improvement in terms of public institutions. Then of course you have the Economic Freedom Index. So it's not just us saying things are improving in the Philippines. If you look at the global benchmarks, that's what they indicate too. This looks like a rosy picture, and indeed we have achieved so much in so short a period of time. But we cannot allow ourselves to go complacent. More work needs to be done if we are to envision a Philippines where no one is left behind, where every Filipino has a fair chance for socioeconomic empowerment. Then we need to find a way to sustain the very governance reforms that have made our successes possible. Establishing a solid and resilient foundation of good governance is the first critical stage in the Philippines' ambitious, long overdue bid for inclusive development. This has been the primary mission of the Aquino administration. Yet, in fulfilling our commitments to the Filipino people, we recognize that 6 years is not enough for the ambitiousness of our reform narrative. If we are to continue the progress we are now benefiting from, we must stay the course of good governance so that we can move on to more fundamental reforms in the way wealth and power is shared in our country. A genuinely transparent, accountable, and open government doesn't just talk about change. It actually makes change happen beyond the halls of its institutions, so that society itself is transformed. Under good governance, we're also talking about fixing the entire bureaucratic structure and reducing graft and corruption in government to the minimum. Challenges do abound in this pursuit, but so far, so good. What we need to understand, however, is that we cannot stop at anti-corruption and institutional reforms if our ultimate goal is inclusive development. We need to repair the same structures upon which our prevailing political and economic behaviors are built. You see, the painful reality in the Philippines is this: even if you work hard and follow the rules, there's no guarantee that success will be yours. The greatest myth of our time is that the poor are lazy and that all they need to do is get jobs so they can fix their lives. But so many of the poor are actually very hardworking. The problem is that opportunities for personal growth are perpetually elusive to them. If we succeed in restructuring the economy, and always in the spirit of proper governance, the fulfillment of the middle class dream won't be far off. In this dream, working hard and following the rules will be justly rewarded. To progress to this stage, we must oversee the evolution of our economy from a consumption and internally driven one. A good chunk of our growth now is still coming from the inside, from the provision and acquisition of property and goods. It must, from this point, progress to an economy that draws more and more strength from creating new wealth through manufacturing, one that is production and export-oriented. We've already jump-started this phase, as evidenced by the growth of our manufacturing sector. This, however, must be sustained in the next administration if we are to see structural reforms there. Against this backdrop, we can nurture a stable and fair business environment that will encourage a bigger influx of investment and the creation of businesses large and small. We Within such an environment, a robust middle class can emerge, buoyed by the creation of more quality jobs in our most promising industries, including agribusiness, tourism, information technology, and of course, business process outsourcing, where we have dislodged India as the #1 BPO destination in the world. With the aid and support of this empowered middle class, the government can be more effective in dismantling monopolies and weakening the influence of oligarchs that only serve to frustrate equitable growth and business competitiveness. At this juncture, the government and the business environment will be ripe for further economic reform. And here is the apex of our development effort: the careful and deliberate acceleration of our economy so that the Philippine economy can expand to the fullness of its potential. A highly developed political and economic culture is one that actively facilitates innovation. It's no longer just around manufacturing goods. The focus at this stage is to apply cutting-edge technologies and use them to drive innovations from industry to industry, effectively preparing the Philippines to enter the global market with confidence. The stage of economic reform will be geared towards active wealth generation and service provision, where more and more Filipinos establish themselves as entrepreneurs. We need to develop a market that aims for technological and commercial breakthroughs. Under the Aquino administration, we've laid down the groundwork for sustainable economic growth. If we stay faithful to the trajectory of our reform narrative, then we must come out of hiding, equip ourselves properly, and bring ourselves confidently to the international front. When we succeed in nurturing an economic climate that is at once stable, self-sustaining, and competitive, we can proceed with greater confidence towards our goal of bringing poverty levels down to single digits. We can empower our citizens to be their own creators of wealth and bring prosperity to every region, every city, and every community in this country. What is economic growth after all, if our people do not benefit from the gains that we are making? The Aquino administration is now at the penultimate year of its leadership. There is at this point a lot of anxiety about the fate of the Philippines after 2016. Analysts always ask us this question: after everything we've achieved, how sure are we that reforms under President Aquino will endure? I think this was a question asked by the Filipino in Chicago. Will we see a Philippines that will persist on its course of inclusive development? Will we continue to see a bureaucracy that is as passionate at restoring its own integrity? If we are to stay on track towards a better Philippines, we need to think well and hard about the sort of leadership that this country deserves. We've seen so much progress under a trustworthy and competent president, one whose campaign is consistently devoted to serving the Filipino people's will. Isn't this what public service is really all about? Isn't it our responsibility to protect the Filipinos' interests so that no one is really, truly not left behind? Many of you have been away from home for a long time. Yet I am sure that the distance that separates you from our motherland has only intensified your commitment to serving our country. I have no doubt that you have already contributed much to the welfare of your families, that you have worked hard and continue to work hard for the sake of the people you love. And I know that you will keep working tirelessly as long as it helps your families, and as long as you see that your loved ones will have a sure and solid future. Yet I am sure that you would like to see the day when Filipinos won't have to leave our shores to lead decent lives. We too share that same hope and vision, and I want to reassure you of this, that we are finally on our way to making this happen, that we can, within our lifetimes, bear witness to a Philippines that prizes and upholds the well-being of its citizens. Almost 5 years ago, our people willed good governance into action. The people did this because they hungered for meaningful change under a president whose foremost interest lay in advancing their best interests. I have absolute faith that we will once again make the right decision when the time for it arrives. Filipinos all over have already wheeled the country into the growing success that it now represents. You can make it happen again, and I'm sure you will. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Secretary Abad, for the very enlightening presentation. And as you may have noticed, you touched on many of the issues that we have asked before. Maybe you might want to clarify these issues more from his perspective as Budget Secretary, and at the same time, of course, within the close circle of President Aquino. So we're now opening the table, not the floor, for questions. Let me just identify yourself, then ask your question or give your comment. Okay, thank you. Anyone?
And we'll ask the first question.
Okay.
Yes, thank you very much. I am, we are all here glad that the Philippines that we left behind is moving up into the forefront of Southeast Asia, at least, and the world coming soon. Because I am very involved with the China question, and in fact, we are doing a rally of boycott China goods in front of Apple store because most of their products are manufactured in China. Is the president not worried that we are being surrounded by islands, artificially made islands? I think primarily for military installation of airports and fixing them. Meaning to say, China is encroaching on our territory, and how does the president view this?
Well, certainly the president is concerned about this. I think among all the ASEAN leaders, he's been the one who has been at the forefront of reminding China about its incursions in our territorial and fishing waters. And quietly, he has also been making his own diplomatic linkages. Of course, starting with those countries that have also decided to stand up to China's incursions, like South Vietnam, and of course next week again the Philippines has been invited for a state visit in Japan. He leaves on June 2, and I'm sure that part of the agenda there will cover regional security issues with the Prime Minister Abe. And I think his position has emboldened even other countries now to start, making statements about, at least expressing concern, like very recently Indonesia, and to some extent Malaysia. But I think at the end of the day, there is really no other force that can promote some degree of stability in the region, other than, of course, the United States. And the president has also been engaging the United States through President Obama, especially trying to helping pave the way for what they call the United States. What's the term that they
Pivot.
Pivot to Asia. Of course, we recognize the challenges faced by this administration, getting bipartisan support for their initiatives here, especially the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. But I think those are important initiatives in building linkages and developing a significant presence in the region. Very lately, I think the U.S. has taken even a more substantial position, which has elicited a response from China. Today I read that one of the newspapers threatened war, because of statements being made by the U.S. and the flyovers being made over, constructions in certain parts of the region. So, the president is very, very much, despite the fact that knowing, the Philippines' limitations, I think this cannot be settled even just among the multilateral partnerships within the region. It is a global concern, and therefore, other countries in the region, Japan, Australia, and of course the United States are looking at the situation very closely and are in touch with the president on this. We unfortunately we do not know the internal dynamics that's happening in China, but I'm sure they have, and normally when there are internal problems, then their posturings abroad become predictably, aggressive, and I think that's the balancing act that they have to do, to try to. Usually, when you do that, the objective is to try to unify the country against. It's always a ploy that in the past has succeeded in uniting the country against foreign aggressors. So, but it's a very complicated situation, I must say. But the good thing about the Philippines is that we have been able really to address our internal security problems. The secessionist movement, and of course the communist insurgency movement are, I think, on the wane. In particular, the peace agreement achieved with the MILF after 40 years of armed struggle and 27 years of negotiations. And just very recently, Joma Sison, has sent feelers about, wanting to restart the negotiations with the CPP and the ANDF. So I think, with the resources freed up by, lesser problems with internal security, then we can begin to focus more on our regional security concerns.
Just follow up. Why is the Philippines then going to join China in this Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank? When we are on the one hand saying don't invade us, and then we will join this bank organized by China.
Yeah, it's it's a very complicated situation. By the way, right now, between June and December, we are sitting in there as an observer. And I think any decision to join the AIIB will only happen anytime between June and December. The challenge that faces not just the Philippines, but for example, United Kingdom and many other countries that are closely allied with the U.S. Who are considering seriously joining the infrastructure bank is this: do we isolate China and allow it to pursue its own course, or do we engage China and get China, especially its economy, to be more and more deeply integrated into the global economy, and therefore puts us in a better position, to hold China in check? For example, take the case of Russia in relation to Ukraine, because much of Russia's economic and financial transactions are really integrated into the world economy. Then sanctions can be applied on Russian citizens as well as on Russian investments. That makes Russia seriously think whether their moves in Crimea and Ukraine are really to their interest. And right now, because of low oil prices and the sanctions imposed, it's in serious economic crisis. So these are the things that are confronting countries in the region. not to mention the fact that really many economies in the Asia Pacific, especially those that are producing mineral resources, are closely tied up to the Chinese economy. I mean, look at every country, and at least, especially those who export oil or ores or all sorts of minerals, easily 30% of their economy is tied up with the Chinese. Of course, right now, because of the slowdown in the Chinese economy, they're also suffering, but there's still a significant trade happening between China and those countries, all the way up to South America, like Chile and Brazil. Both Chile and Brazil are suffering because China's slowing down. So it's a complicated situation, and so there is. I think you have to balance the need to isolate them or to because of their behavior, but at the same time to engage them so that they don't end up a rude country like North Korea. So that's really what we need to be doing.
One quick question. I saw the documentary by Chiara Zambrano on on these Bradley Islands. And I was curious, where is anything being done to strengthen our national defense? What is its, where is it in our national budget? Because I saw that only the soldiers are being given 90 pesos a day for meals. And we were appalled by that. I am just curious, where is the national defense in our budget?
Okay. Well, when we started out, we had to make a choice. Our internal security problem. We are the only country in Southeast Asia that's still confronting secessionist movement and an insurgency campaign. And that's really at the root of that is the problem of social injustice. People not being provided the very basic needs for them to survive. So the first question that to us is we have to address first the needs of our people for social protection, for social services, and for infrastructure. Because we need to grow the economy so that there are more jobs. So that was very clear from the very start. That we should prioritize our basic, very basic needs first. Because it's going to be very difficult to defend yourself from an external aggressor if internally you're also riven by social conflicts, and that's really what we have. So we had to deal with that problem first, and to the tribute of the president, I think we are substantially doing that. And I think by the time the next administration comes in, our internal domestic security problems will be very minimal, so that now we can confront this concern. But that is not to say that we have not paid attention to our national defense. In fact, if you look at our investments in national defense and compare them to all administrations before us, you would see the huge investments. We are putting in something like easily about 25 billion increase in investments for infrastructure every year. And for the first time ever, our Philippine Navy, our Philippine Air Force, they're now riding new boats and new planes. And the president has a particular interest actually in military as well as police concerns, and that's why I think that's part of the reason why the police and the DND are getting their fair share of the budget. That's why I said the more that we are able to put in check our internal security concerns, then the more we'll be able to pay attention to the regional security concerns.
Thank you.
Let's follow up on that Spratly Island. I also saw the documentary. Let's get more domestic, more local about that. I saw in the documentary that the military personnel that's in there, the Marines that were assigned there, are so, deprived of all the facilities that need to be given them. They're living in quarters that's leaking, walls falling apart, and Also, their allowance for food is only 99 pesos per day.
90.
90 pesos per day. And according to the documentary, it was increased to 150 pesos per day. It's really, that's really just going to buy a hot dog here in New York. Is there anything that the Department of Budget can do? Because apparently the top honchos in the national defense are not paying attention to the conditions of the military that were assigned there. Is there anything that the budget department can do to earmark some funds for the military, specifically to provide for the Marines and the people there in this practice?
Well, you have to look at this in perspective. You know, we have 7,100 islands. And there are major islands that in fact need to be secured first. Before we go into these really smaller, you know, they're not even islands we have islands with population that we have not been able to provide protection for, you know, from poaching, from smuggling, from incursions by Indonesians, and you know, so it's not that the Department of National Defense has not paid attention to it. I think it's because the Department of National Defense has to pay attention to even more important areas of the country that really need attention. For example, right in my home, in my own backyard up north, you know, we are actually closer to Kaohsiung than to the Philippines. Our border there is so porous. You know, so many things happen there without the national government knowing it, and simply because in the previous years, because of our own economic difficulties, we've not been really able to invest money to protect and make sure that those porous borders are secured. It's only, for example, now that, you know, up there in about 8 other places, we are putting up coastal resource and defense areas, you know, through a collaboration of the Philippine Navy, the Philippine Coast Guard, and the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, a Coast Watch Center, you know, and these are a building in these 8 areas, all the way down to, for example, in the border between Tawi-Tawi and Sabah, you know, they're even using different money there. You know, they're not using pesos. You know, they have their own. So we have many places which are rich, which are populated, which we need to secure first. And I think that's really the point why, you know, places like Spratlys, as of now, don't get the necessary attention that they deserve.
Yeah. Mr. Secretary, just 3 questions. First is, if you could negotiate with the future hypothetical president of the Philippines, what would you like him or her to preserve as, like continue, like, if you want to say, keep these 3 things from the current administration in terms of protecting, like, a program or an agenda that would not ensure, but at least increase the chances of what you've started succeeding? What would you ask? The second is, sorry, I have 3 guys. The second is, in terms of the PPP programs, what would you have done differently to get them started much faster? What did the administration learn about PPP and infrastructure? And finally, the third, on poverty, what is the profile of the poor right now in the Philippines, and what do you think should a voter in the Philippines demand of the next leader in terms of addressing the question of poverty, just in terms of policy direction?
Anybody who can answer your question can run for president.
Is he or she running for president?
You know, there are 2 things that I think it's important for the next stage. One is, to keep the trust of the citizens on their government. A government that's earned the trust of its people will have the confidence to pursue even more difficult reforms. We have just touched the surface here. We need to implement structural, economic, and political reforms. We have to open up the economy to be more competitive, but we also have to open up the politics of our country to be more competitive. To be more transparent. So,
How would you change that
well,
if you had the power?
I think the reason why Filipinos believe President Aquino is because when he said, "I'll vigorously pursue anti-corruption initiatives," he did not mean small people. He meant, people who matter, and I think that's given him that credibility, and he's really been true to that. Number two, I think the credibility that we've earned, with the international investing public also has to be secured. Look at those numbers. In the first 2 years of this administration, they were very reluctant to come in and invest because all these years we've suffered very poor credibility because the rules keep changing. There's no stability in policies. Things are unpredictable. But lately, we have come to some degree of stability there and predictability. So now they're coming in. So we have to make sure that predictability and stability stay, so that investments are needed and investments coming to the country. And we've seen that in the FDI growth last year, 66%, which is the fourth most improved in the world. Now, your second question was poverty.
Yeah, because inequality is becoming a bigger issue here. Globally, it's becoming a bigger issue, inequality. So in the Philippines, you see, you go to Manila, you see all the nice condos, all the big condos. But my wife's family comes from Isabela. I travel 3 times a year to the Philippines. I travel to Isabela. I travel to almost every corner. I've been to Bohol, lahat yan. I've been there in the last 3, 4, 5 years. I want to go to Batanes one of these days. It's on my bucket list. Okay, so just the question of inequality. Because the fear is if the Philippines becomes more unequal, you have the social gap that you see happening in Thailand, where you have Thaksin and against the military. What do you think should we do about how do we solve it not solve, but how do we address it within a reasonable time span within the term of a next president? What do we do?
Inequality remains to be a serious problem in the Philippines. You look at the PPP winners, they're just 7 families. And inequality is not only by class. Of course, that's clearly the case. Inequality is also geographical. 65% of GDP comes from just 3 regions: Region 3, NCR, and 4A. 63%, I should say, of GDP. So it's all in Luzon, and there's no that much development before outside of Luzon. But in our it's a structural, historical problem. The very inequitous sharing of not just economic wealth but political power in this country. And it will take more than a term to address that. But I think what the president has done for the 6 years that was given him was to direct the national budget to making sure that poor people have protection. When we started, the conditional cash transfer program benefited about 800,000 families with a budget of 10 billion pesos. Today, we are now spending 64 billion pesos, benefiting 4.3 million households. And that is why the DSWD has been funded amply well. When we started, basic education was getting something like 225 billion pesos in funding. Today, it's 450 billion pesos. So there is practically no classroom shortage, no teacher shortage, no textbook shortage to speak of now, because they have been covered. Or take, for example, universal health. When we started, the budget of the Department of Health was 30 billion. Today, it's 93.5 billion. And we are covering about 15.4 million poor Filipinos with 100% subsidy for their universal health care. So, infrastructure for employment. When we started out, our total infrastructure allocation was 165 billion. Today it's 570 billion pesos. So there is a huge investment, in making sure that the poor are better cared for in terms of health and are better educated, and that eventually that they will all graduate from being beneficiaries of the conditional cash transfer program to become employed in some manufacturing jobs. But that's just 6 years. You cannot do much more than that. The more serious task of building a strong manufacturing base is really what the next administration really has to be looking at.
So, piggybacking on what you're saying, I absolutely agree with you that the government currently has done tremendous amount of inroads into success. In fact, I was one of my company actually invested in the Philippines in 2010. So
You were smart.
yes, you can ask the ambassador, I'm a big proponent of the Philippines. So how do you, I work for the New York Stock Exchange, so how do we as Filipinos guarantee that we can continue in this path? It's great, 6 years we've done tremendous work, but it's also very easy to fall back in, our, I guess, comfort zones, corruption or whatever, right? So how do you guarantee that? What's in place to have checks and balances, for example? How do you make sure that the country continues down this path, especially when the current administration is not going to be there?
Well, that's really the question of the day. And we have tried various measures to make sure that some of these reforms are embedded in policy. For example, the syntax reform. When we started out, we projected that we'll only earn about an incremental 35 billion from adjusting the taxes of cigarettes and liquor. It turns out that we actually generated 51 billion pesos. So you could fund in full the universal health care program. So you embed them in policy, or you can introduce or leverage technology. For example, by the end of this year, payments in government will be cashless and checkless. So I mean, people will not want to go, but using the banks. So people are not going to get their salaries from their departments. It's going to come from the treasury straight to their bank accounts. GSIS remittances will go from the treasury straight to GSIS. Withholding taxes straight from the treasury to the BIR. So you save a lot of. So you can leverage technology, but you can also make people aware who have many have become, not just the business community as in your case, have become real stakeholders of this reform. And we have been telling, for example, CCT beneficiaries, they meet every month in family council meetings where they also learn financial inclusivity and develop skills. And we tell them that this program is not going to stop at just doling out money to you, because the next stage is for you to get quality jobs so that you can on your own feed yourself and take care of yourself. So they know this and they expect this to happen. So it's going to be difficult politically to reverse those types of reform. But really, at the end of the day, if you ask me, what has changed in 2010? I think what has changed in 2010 is the character of the state. The state is a powerful player in the Philippine political structure because government is pervasive. So you have to make sure that the next president that you elect is a president who is going to continue that narrative. And I will be at the risk of being misinterpreted. You know, I think President Aquino will play a critical role in defining for us who that successor should be. Because in 2010, he was not a candidate. In fact, when he was asked to run, he was a very reluctant candidate. But then people said, you know, we are so saddened by the departure of your mother, who is now going to be carrying the torch for decency in public service. And they pointed to the son, who reluctantly agreed. I think people, once again, should stand up and say, we want another president, this time around, who will bring us to another level of development. And I think, at the end of the day, really, it's you guys, it's we, who have to make that decision. Because we made that decision in 2010, unprecedentedly. It was the second popular presidential draft, the first being his mother. And so I think we should really, you know, as they say, take the initiative once again to do that in 2016. Let us not frame the elections as a business as usual elections. Otherwise, you know, people will be complacent. But let us frame that election as an election of a genuine continuity of these changes.
Okay, can I call on Ernie first, then Chris? Yeah. You do it this way.
Okay, I can call you Butch, right?
Yes, yes, sure.
My name is Ernesto Gani from Pennsylvania.
Okay.
I have to come here very early just I heard so much about you. Okay. Anyway, my question is a follow-up on what Mike and Angie has said. I belong to this small group, they call it U.S. Pinoys for Good Governance. And we...
By the way, you're heard in the Philippines, I must tell you that.
We organize in the Philippines.
And the
but,
president mentions you.
we never had enough cloud to move around. My question to you is, I also like all of them. I was you watch that Kalayaan or Spratly Island documentary. Okay. And aside from the allowances that was really very little, there is also an issue about the morale of the soldiers assigned there. Okay. I was once a soldier also in the Philippines, in the army. Okay. My question is there a way, because there's nothing really there, and all the soldiers that were interviewed are just really sad. You know, we are afraid, but you know that if the Chinese decide to slaughter them, they have nothing. The armaments that they have is just the leftover from the Second World War. No? My question to you is this, because this is really the reason why I came back here today, because I just want to share with you the human side of those people living in this outpost, very far outpost. And aside from the food that everybody needs, I think we should also attend to them to the recreational side that make them happy to be there. And that is my question. How can you do in Pennsylvania? I can travel now and ride the bus and the train because I'm a senior citizen for free. Where's the money coming from the lottery? You also have lottery in the Philippines. Can we put up some money from the lottery to improve the living standards of the 100 company of soldiers assigned in the Sparkly? Is that possible under your command? Of course, you are the parts of the national government. So what is 1 million or 2 million a month to augment the needs of the soldiers? But let's talk about the human requirement here, and that is, I think, something that you can decide and tell us now that you are going to do it. Okay? Thank you.
Well, we'll bring that to the attention of the Department of National Defense. We are right now putting together the 2016 budget, the final budget of this administration, and you know, it's not really for me to decide what their priorities should be. It's really for the Department of National Defense to tell the cabinet where we should make investments insofar as regional security. But we've seen the photos, we've seen the documentaries, even of Pag-asa. So before, when we did not have problems with China, these places were really
Meditation.
deliberately left to themselves because we were paying attention to more pressing needs that are nearby. But now, because of the incursions by China, of course, these islets are getting the attention, and I guess properly so. So maybe the Department of National Defense has to then tweak their priorities to consider these islands that are now being threatened by the aggression of China.
Okay, Chris.
Thank you.
Secretary Butch, thank you for coming to New York. Two small questions. First, during the administration of Cory Aquino, she inherited a huge national debt, and she was even criticized for not repudiating it, and that might have worked for us. And now, and through other administrations, it seems to have gotten bigger, and I know for a fact that just servicing the interest rates of these debt bleeds the country's coffers, and will we ever see the day that this debt will finally be paid up and free us from this huge burden? Second question is on the cultural front. The excitement is over in Manila. The excitement is over the purchase of the Metropolitan Theater by the NCCA with your good office approval. And I just want to know if that transaction has been completed already between the NCCA and the GSIS, which owns the property.
Well, with respect to this latter question, we made the down payment of 277 million, and the rest, according to the terms agreed upon with GSIS, will be paid in installments. So we will be actually, this is just money that's going from the left pocket to the right, so there shouldn't be any problem. I think it's a good acquisition because there is a planned redevelopment of that area around Loton. They're thinking of developing the Philippine post office as a hotel, similar to what they have in Singapore. The name of that hotel. And so I think, and then of course the Met is a cultural icon. So this will pave the way for those plans now to be put together by the NCCA. Now, with respect to debt. As I showed you earlier, when the economy expands, there is your need for debt falls and falls and falls. And in our case, it's from 2010 to this day, it's been falling. We have no need to borrow so much money, especially even despite the fact that the interest regime is really ideal for borrowing a lot of money because it's so low. But we've been raising the requirements that we need. So you will see that debt as a percentage of GDP falling to, well, our target is to, when it went as high as 65% of GDP. Our target is to bring it down to a little over 40%, which is huge improvement. Now, the matter of debt repudiation, of course, in activist parlance, that sounds good. But once you stop paying your debt, that means the end for your, not just your ability to borrow money, but your ability to invest or to receive investments is going to be drastically affected, and you may end up in a worse situation than before. That's why, in fact, it's not even a choice. It's not even an option because the consequences are rather dire for the country. So I think you borrow money, of course you can say, but it was a corrupt administration, but it was in the name of our country, and so some of those things that we cannot avoid doing. And so sabi nga nila, kailangan meron din tayong salita. So we pay for those debts, and I don't think that it's bad to borrow money you know, as in business, if you invest it and earn much more than what you pay for by way of interest and principal, then it's a good deal. But if you borrow money and steal that money, then that's really bad. And that's what we had, you know, for a good 14 years.
Yeah, I'd like. Magandang umaga po. Mr. Butch, Abad. We were together at Asia a long time ago.
That's Ateneo Catechetical Instruction League.
We were both teaching volunteers. Catechism. Actually, it was my introduction to community development. I never forget my experience from that exposure. Mr. Abad,
You can call me Butch.
Okay. Alam ko yung sasabihin mo eh. Butch, ganito in the wake of President Aquino's victory in 2010, there was a group of Ateneo alumni and UP alumni and some inspired members of US Pinoy and NAFA who banded together representing the overseas Filipino nation. We shared a common idea, an ambitious idea, but for us it's very inspiring because we believe that we could tap at that time the power and resources of the overseas Filipino nation, overseas Filipino workers all over the world. At that time, it was considered ang kanilang asset is something like $700 billion. You know, a little, almost equal than Switzerland. The idea is this: with Noynoy's, you know, with the people's newfound trust with Noynoy. Noynoy could step into the picture, mobilize the OFW, get the resources, get them to invest the resources to purchase our debts. Lalabas, ang Filipino, the Filipino nation will now be the debtor of the OFW who has purchased the debt of the Philippines. Our group, represented by Loida, headed by Loida, went into almost 12 months of negotiation, right, Loida? And nothing happened. Sayang yung pagkakataon because just imagine, we OFW, Overseas Filipino Nation, always felt that challenge that we have betrayed our country by leaving the Philippines. Although we know it's not true, because we love the Philippines, precisely because there was nothing there for us. Sayang ang pagkakataon natin, nag-aaral tayo, pero walang pagagamitan. Kung hindi, alam mo na, karate dito, karate doon, hindi naman natin linya yon. So we have to live. Now going back to the story, if the OFW would participate in the national development of the Philippines, just imagine what yung inspiration sa kanya. Yeah, I left the Philippines, but I come back as a savior together with others. But nang nawala yung istorya, that narrative fell to become real because natigil nga yung negotiation. Is there any plan for this administration in the last remaining months to mobilize the overseas Filipino workers' resources?
Well, first of all, let me recognize really your huge contribution to the Philippine economy. Last year, you brought home $27 billion, and remittances continue to grow between 5 to 6% every month. So it's one of the reasons why the Philippines has been resilient. You know, looking at the foreign exchange volatility, together with about $18 billion from business process outsourcing, that's about 45 billion pesos that the country can rely on every year. And that really is protecting the peso after the quantitative easing policy that the U.S. adopted as it recovered from its own crisis. So it's a huge it's a huge resource that is coming into the economy, which is fueling much of the consumption-driven growth in the country. And it's always a favorite topic, how because these are earnings, these are not capital assets that you hold. And so your question about how can we consolidate those assets so that they can be invested in the future. Actually, the truth of the matter is you are already investing, all those condominiums mushrooming in Fort Bonifacio and many other places. All those malls that are sprouting all over the country are really investments being poured in. And even right now, our problem is we are not able to keep pace with the growth that's happening right now. Many Filipino families send their children for college in the Philippines now and buy them a condominium, and those are huge investments now. What's the magnitude of that investment? It's easily in the billions of dollars, and so I think even without the government, in fact, maybe even better because the government is not there to get in the way. You are making those investments already.
Butch, what is the government doing to address the killing of journalists? Is it a matter of witnesses not coming forward, or is it a matter of politics, like the suspects are political allies of the government?
Well, if you analyze many of these killings, it's fundamentally unlike during the martial law regime, where it was the policy of the state to repress dissent or the exercise of freedom of expression of the press. This is totally different. Even, to some extent, when the previous administration, because of its unpopularity and illegitimacy, was being forced to the wall, there was elements of that already taking place. That's why the UN Rapporteur on Human Rights made that declaration about disappearances. But under this administration, there's no such policy. And if you look at the cases, these are usually either cases involving journalists holding local warlords or politicians to account, or exposing wetting, or exposing smuggling. So these are really, in a way, incidents that are happening very locally. While the government has actively been working to dismantle private armed groups, there are still remaining portions of the country where warlordism continues to be, especially in places where insurgency is high. So really, these are the areas, and but more and more, we are beginning to isolate these places. You can limit, for example, the operations of, like for example, Abra and Masbate are notorious for private armies. But now it's been a while since you've heard of any atrocities happening in Masbate and.
We still hear them in several other parts of the country.
Yeah, but you also have to remember. Yeah, you have to remember that there are also instances where the journalists would take sides, in local political context. So, but if you look at the trend, it's falling, but it's not gonna fall dramatically as you know, the political culture in many parts of the country are still, you know, pretty much patronage and in some places warlord dominated.
Okay, can I call Sunny?
Secretary, would you please further explain this PDAP
Okay.
and Port Barrett, because you're always the people is so always looking on you
Yeah.
that you originated that.
Well, you know, change is a risky business. You know, the what they call PDAF, or the Priority Development Assistance Fund. You also have that in America. Earmarking of projects for your own districts. It's really nothing new. In the case of the U.S., your advantage is civil society is very strong, media is independent. So, you know, when you commit foolishness using earmarks, it's hard for you to get away. Not in the case of the Philippines. But in fact, because of this PDAF, the Philippines had an opportunity to move from Philippine-style earmarking to U.S.-style earmarking. But I don't know how the journey is going to happen there. But, you know, we still have a culture that's called political patronage. And, you know, political patronage really rests on you know, a relationship of dependency between poor people and those they depend for health, for education, even survival day to day. And dependency is really rooted in poverty. You know? And so if we are able to address poverty significantly, then the need to depend on somebody else for your day-to-day survival is reduced significantly. And therefore, you begin to change the quality of your politics. You know? Mahirap nang pagbenta ng boto or mahirap nang bumili ng boto. But if poverty persists, then dependency persists, then patronage remains. And PDAF really was the instrument for certain politicians to stay in power. Because, you know, they hold the lives of people literally in their palms. And so before they even go to the precinct, they go to their patron and say, sino ba ang iboboto natin? And that's really the case for many parts of the country. And that has been the relationship that characterized many of politicians, especially in Congress. That's why their insistence on preserving that mechanism of being able to earmark parts of the General Appropriation Act for their districts. But the problem is, some, and this is not even the majority of politicians, started to literally steal those monies instead of turning them into projects. And I guess because of their greed, they started exposing each other. That's why the scandal. That is always the case. Now, why is my name being linked to that? Well, we actually started the whole process of exposing this because I told the legislators, okay, because the president initially wanted to stop it. But since it was practiced generally in Congress, it was a choice of not getting your budget approved. Sort of playing along with but the president said, people should not steal the money. So what we did was, we published in the DBM website what every legislator was getting. And then we required every legislator to submit a list of their projects. What project, how much, where to be implemented. And we also required them to submit accountability reports. So what happened, who won the bid, And this came out in the DBM website, which was then used by the media and the Commission on Audit to do further research on some of these legislators, which eventually led to a special audit report of COA that exposed quite a number of them this diversion of funds. And they were not, of course, happy with the president and with myself. But I think it's a good development because now people are really vigilant, and they want, and it forces us to further digitize and make transparent the operations of government. So we now have an open data system in governments. You know, when you look at the DBM website, you just don't see statistics and information. You can actually, because of open data, manipulate the system. So that, for example, you want to know this senator, what are his projects all over the country? Can you summarize them for me? You can do that with the open data system. And you know, there was a point where, and I'll be very specific, one of those who was found to have abused this facility was Senator Jingo Estrada. And as a way of diverting, you know, attention from him, he started pointing to a program that we were implementing to accelerate the use of public funds, which is really the disbursement acceleration program. Basically, the question that DAP answered was, you know, before, what departments did was they would not spend their money. At the end of the year, they accumulate huge amounts of savings, which then they declare as savings, and then convert into benefits and bonuses. In fact, in one of the zonas of the president, an agency called Local Water Utilities Administration, they practically filled up the alphabet with all sorts of benefits like sauna bonus, birthday bonus, you know. And the president said, oh, we cannot do that. So we stopped the practice. We stopped the practice. And not only that, you know, we systematize, we streamline all the bonuses and benefits received so that everybody gets equal. And when any department who was not spending his money, I was given instruction by the president, take the budget away from them and give it to an agency that can use that money better. And unfortunately, the Supreme Court said, you're not allowed to do that. You have to go back to Congress.
Yeah, okay, I'll call the ladies first because I saw the man's face first. We start with Ross, then Choji, Cynthia, Marlene, Mirna. Number of gentlemen. Okay, can we do it in the toilet? Do you have time, Mr. Secretary?
And then we're okay, no? Our train is still okay. You have to catch a 12:30 train to
so
Boston.
can we just make our, if you have comments, make it brief, go straight to the point. Okay,
Yes, my name is Rosalie. I'm president of Bacas Filipinas, which is a nonprofit group here that helps preserve historic buildings in the Philippines. So we welcome your projects on heritage. We really do. And we heard that you're very sympathetic to them. But
the National Museum has not seen the money that they're getting right
well,
now.
but just the intent and the proposals makes us happy. And we do know that all over the world, heritage preservation has been demonstrated to be effective in economic development, not to mention the beneficial effect for reinforcing national identity, which is, to me, the antidote to some identity crisis that we may have. You know. So is heritage preservation a strategic part of the country's economic strategies, even though it's a small one?
Well, you know, if you link heritage conservation to tourism, it is. In fact, you know, according to Secretary Mon Jimenez, many tourists that visit now in the Philippines are not really interested in shopping or in playing golf. They want to get a taste of local culture, local heritage, you know, and the integrity of the environment, you know. So that's why intimately we have been working closely with the NCCA, with the NHCP, with the National Historical Institute, with the National Museum, you know, to make sure that tourism, especially ecotourism programs, you know, feature prominently local culture. That's why we're also reviving or building museums all over the country, and making it the hub for both heritage awareness and conservation and promotions programs. So it is strategic in that sense, because I think if we anchor tourism development to environmental and heritage programs, I think they're mutually reinforcing programs that in the end benefits especially small communities that are fragile because of their ecosystem, like Batanes.
Just follow up. I do want to put in a word for training programs for heritage professionals, because we're still very weak in that.
Well, I'll tell you something. You know, in Batanes, which is my province, you've been there, right? You know, before we would get 1,000 tourists and like it's a lot of people already. In 2013, the number went up to 6,300. Last year, it was 17,000.
Wow.
This year, it's projected to grow to 30,000. But the good thing about it is it's founded on homestays, you know, so that it's community-based kind of tourism. So, especially since many tourists want to live in our stone houses.
Yeah.
Before, we would worry about how do we preserve these Ivatan vernacular houses. But now you pay a premium for living or staying in one of those vernacular houses. So, you know, tourism then is now the catalyst for preserving and conservation of our vernacular houses. So it really works both ways.
Okay, Georgie?
Hi, I'm Georgia Landoni. I'm one of the out of the 3 million nurses in America right now. Check that out. And then by 2020, there's going to be a tsunami of nurses who are retiring. So is the Philippines on track to a better Philippines ready for these nurses who are going to be going on probably on a fixed income and probably will also deplete the health industry in terms of luggage?
Oh my, I don't know that problem very well. But let me tell you this, every year we've been hiring more than 20,000 nurses a year, because you know, one of the president's priorities is primary health care. You know, he's not too keen in building hospitals or these specialty hospitals. He wants to make sure that, you know, we have very strong network of barangay health stations and rural health units. Especially in the case of rural health units, at the end of this year, we want to be able to complete the construction or rehabilitation of all rural health units in every municipality in this country, in our country, and making sure that they are PhilHealth accredited. You know, they're PhilHealth accredited, because right now PhilHealth has huge funds, and our problem with building hospitals is really access and affordability. You know, when you're a poor family, you don't live in the poblacion, you live up in the mountains. So strengthening the network of, especially now, because the rural health units provide, unlike before, they did not provide for primary health care or what they call outpatient services like checkups, you know. But now they're doing that. And so it will also make those rural health units viable unto themselves because of the PhilHealth program. So that's one opportunity there, because we have to staff. Now that we have money, we can then deploy nurses, midwives, and in some strategic regional centers, doctors. So, but pretty soon there's going to be a strong need for more nurses in these areas.
And you have that resources to use.
Well, the other one is there is a growing need for nurses in the business process outsourcing industry. You know, while the American doctors here are asleep, Filipino nurses back home are preparing the things that they need to do so that when they wake up, the diagnosis, everything that they need is ready for them to look at. So there's a huge demand for nurses now in the business process outsourcing industry.
Okay, can you call Cynthia?
Yes, good afternoon, good morning. I'm Cynthia Esquivel. I'm from the Ateneo alumni. My question is just one simple question. Who would, since you are very close to the president, who would you think would endorse for the next 2000? Who would the president endorse for the next 2016? It's just
You know, I have to make a disclosure here. I'm a liberal partisan. I was president of the party for 6 years, so certainly I would say, as far as the president is concerned, and he said this the other day, top on the list of the names he is seriously considering for endorsement after the SONA is secretary. But let me tell you this, 2016 is not really, a partisan choice. It's more than that. This is not just choosing between one party or not. In fact, in 2010, it wasn't the parties who made the choice. It was you guys, the people, and I think that should still be the case. Although I will not, belittle the important role that political parties play, especially in making sure that people go to the votes get counted, and that the candidates get proclaimed, and therefore you have winners. But at the end of the day, 2016 is really a choice between, we have done so much, there is so much more we can do. Are we going to continue that, or are we going to go back to the old ways? And I really that as stark as presented, that's really the choice that's before us.
Okay, Marilyn.
Hi, my name is Marilyn Abelos. I was quite delighted to hear that you have a system in place to send payroll directly to state employee banks or country employee banks, and also collect taxes that way. So the question came up, investment in technology.
Right.
My question is, how committed and to what extent are you investing in technology? I've heard that because of and the second question, or second part of that question, is investment in education for technology. Singapore and Korea are very strong in technology. That's why they're able to export electronics and other technology, products. And there are groups of people here that want to invest, to make sure that that's something that the government should be focusing on. So if you can give me a little comment on that.
Well, we are working with Citibank. Jay Collins is based here, is regularly in touch. This year is a full rollout of two important programs. One is the cashless purchase card. So when people in government want to procure something, you don't need to have cash. You just use a purchase card, and the liquidation is instant. You can get an instant liquidation. The second one is the payment system in government, which is at the end of this year is going to be checkless and cashless. So there's little money that, except for really petty cash expenses that you need to make, there's very little money that's going to go around government, and that helps a lot. I'll tell you one anecdote. When we came in, we heard horror stories about ghost pensioners in the military and police. And one of the things I did was I asked from the Department of National Defense a roster of people in military service, and they refused to give me because they said it's a matter of national security. I said, okay, you refuse to give me. We think that 20% of your roster are not active employees, and so we will withhold 20%, and we will give you 80% until you give us. But to cut the story short, they eventually did. And what I did was, I asked pensioners to get retina biometrics and to secure an ATM. Otherwise, I will not pay them their pension. Every week they would go to DBM and hold rallies. They say, I was oppressive, we are old people, etc., etc. You were forcing us to go to the banks. But eventually, everyone agreed, and we saved 4.6 billion pesos.
Vote. It went to the pockets of the general.
Of course.
They'll turn it to the people of Kalayaan.
Clear, wink, wink. Diana?
Thank you so much for your very enlightening briefing. You know, I've been away, I mean, even if I go to the Philippines every year, maybe 7 times a year, I'm really not so abreast on everything that's happening in the Philippines. I work at the United Nations. Million years, I've recently retired. I'm still very active with the UN, especially on more international matters. But I'm very happy to hear about the Philippines and the progress that we've made over these past few years. It's really good. My question is precursor to development, and I see that we're on our track, but you know that development requires infrastructure. And so my question to you is, first question is, infrastructure in terms of bridges, you know, roads, communications, all that is all necessary to get and attract investors to the Philippines, and also to go into the manufacturing sector. That's my first question. My second question is how to mitigate the environmental impact of all, you know, the climate change, of course, being that I'm from Tacloban, which is very yes, and that is very important to know. Not only Tacloban, I mean, it's all the Philippines practically. So, what part of the budget is earmarked for that as well as infrastructure?
Well, next year, we will be hitting 5% of GDP in terms of infrastructure investment. And by the time the president's term ends on June 30, we should have finished rehabilitating and paving all our national, arterial, and secondary roads and bridges. All.
This is from Luzon to Mindanao?
Up to Batanes.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Of course,
Yeah, in the case of Batanes, we're done with the funding for all our roads and bridges. You know. But you go to any province in the country, and you will see this construction happening. And, you know, there is an international benchmark called quality of infrastructure. And you would see the graph of the Philippines, it was falling like that and hit the bottom in 2010. And then it recovered again and hit, you know. So even the quality of infrastructure is improving because of the work of the Department of Public Works and Highways. It used to be known as the most corrupt agency of government until you know, Secretary Singson took over and dramatically, you know, changed you know, the impression, the reputation of the Department of Public Works and Highways to become one of the most admired departments. And truly, I must say, because you know, the infrastructure work that's happening all over the country is really unprecedented in Philippine history. And after June 30, 2016, you know, the national government can now afford to go into strategic provincial roads, you know, especially roads that link to tourism zones, roads that lead to markets and production centers, and roads that lead to airports and ports. You know. So we have made huge investments in infrastructure. But those are really, you know, our local infrastructure requirements. Apart from that, we are also building strategic infrastructure, and this is mostly funded by the PPP program. Earlier there was a comment about what could have been done better by way of the PPP. Actually, we are the leading light in the world also in terms of you know, the number and the type of PPP projects being implemented. In fact, the International Financial Center, the IFC, has you know, credited the Philippines for its, and this is courtesy of a very bright woman, Cosette Canilao, who heads the PPP Center in the Philippines. And you know, the kind of investments that they are attracting now are really, for example, one project alone, which is the development of the Laguna de Bay area, both as a source of water, as a tourism zone, as a road infrastructure network. For that project alone, it's about 141 billion pesos.
There was a controversy.
And there are about 14 interested parties to that. So if you put them all together, the next administration is going to be very lucky because many of the ribbons will be cut in the next administration. But we've started 11. There are 10 in the bidding process, and there are about 35 of which visibility studies are being made. So we are in fact on a roll in that.
Mitigation.
Well, the president and our country is very conscious about climate change because we are really among top 3 most vulnerable countries in terms of climate change. In fact, we were hit by the strongest typhoon to ever hit Earth. So there's a lot, lately, for example, for schools, there's been some delay in the construction of schools because we have had to redesign the schools so that, as the president directed, we should build back better, which means if schools used to be able to withstand, or they were built to withstand 175 km/h typhoons, now they are being built to withstand at least 250 km/h typhoon. And that costs money and takes some time. But I think that's really one of the things that we need to do. And there's very, people are quite conscious now and sensitive to the fact that there are geohazard areas of every province where you cannot build. Like for example, the tragedy that happened in Cagayan de Oro in one of those typhoons where so many people, they were building on sand that accumulated in the middle of the river, and for some reason the mayor granted them permit to build on sand. So it was really not surprising for hundreds of people to perish in a calamity like that. But people are now very much conscious that they have to adopt both adaptation and mitigating measures to be able to minimize the effect of climate change. And we are spending a lot of money. For example, for flood control projects, what Secretary Davis has been able to do with the Department of Agriculture is not just to divert water away from villages, but to use that water either for water supply or for irrigation. And so what used to be a source of destruction is now a source of water, a source of irrigation services. So, but like last year we had to spend 49 billion pesos for that. We have about 18 river basins we have to protect communities from.
Okay, Ricky.
Yeah, my name is Ricky Rilera, and I just have 2 short questions, though, because I was really touched by what they have asked previously concerning the soldiers that are outposted from the national region. I know that probably last year we purchased a number of helicopters, which were actually not new ones, not old models. And I was wondering what is the status of investigation about that. And secondly is that on the manufacturing side, you mentioned that that is now the thrust in the following year where the economy would be directed. And there are a lot of young entrepreneurs in Philippines right now. For instance, I saw that there's this group whereby they're developing sea-based cars, and then that can be used also on lands. And I was wondering what kind of incentives is the government giving to these scientists and entrepreneurs, computers, experts. Are there any incentives given to them?
Well, we do have a lot of requirements by way of naval and air support for our military personnel. But these equipments are quite expensive. For example, a brand new C-130 costs $3 billion. And we cannot afford a brand new C-130. So we've had to rely on surplus C-130s. In fact, we bought 3 from the US at a cost of about, I think, 2 to 3 billion pesos each. And people in the Philippines find that very expensive investment. But if you try the new one, it's $3 billion. So you don't have that. The same with Huey helicopters. There were about 21 Huey helicopters. That I think buying them was not the issue. It was the rehabilitation and the provision of spare parts, the procurement of which is now subject to an investigation, because I think there was a whistleblower who surfaced and who's accusing some DND officials. So the investigation is being undertaken by the Senate, but so far nothing conclusive yet. But I think it's important to have those investigations. And the only problem sometimes is, when you're investigated, you land into the front page. Later on, when you found that there was nothing irregular, then you're at page 20.
Well, they say there are no more spare parts for these helicopters. No.
Oh, no.
There are no spare parts available.
Well, no, in fact, there are, but these are limited spare parts. Actually, about 11 of them we own, and not one thing, even the president has declined, has refused to buy himself an airplane. So we don't have a Philippine presidential plane, except a 1965 Fokker plane. It takes a while to take off. So these are huge investments. As I said earlier, we have to make a choice between a range of investments we have to make. Now, incentives, right now, Congress is reviewing the grant of incentives. We have what is called the TIMTA bill. And the only objective of the bill is to make transparent, which businesses are receiving incentives, to what extent are they receiving incentives, and for how long? Because there are quite a number of businesses that actually don't need those incentives, but are getting incentives. So, but we're having a hard time passing this bill, because it's important for the public to know who are getting incentives and to the extent how much incentive they're getting and for how long. Because I think we have to study this incentive system, because we're losing about 175 billion a year for incentives that are being, even telcos get incentives, and they make more than 100 billion a year. So.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
Janet.
you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Sir, I come from, of course, I'd like to classify myself as an OFW. But the thing is, since we are all, Filipinos really look forward to their siblings or family members to go abroad to get more money. So anyway, of course, part of it, most of it are the nurses, the doctors, the medical professionals, which incidentally, we already have a party list in Congress, the nurses represented by Leia Pakis. So I was one of the board members there. So at least if there's something that we have a concern for the nurses also, we have a seat in the Congress also. So my only suggestion is that since we're all talking about the sensitivity of the budget, basic is, I would suggest that at an early age, maybe we should have a financial literacy, because once a graduate goes out at an early age to work abroad, they are so overwhelmed with the money that they have, and they just entrust the money to their family. And of course, the family are just so excited, and of course, they keep up with the Jones to buy this and that, not really knowing how to really invest the money. And here comes one person, like an agent, who goes from one family to the house, or agents of real estate, who talks about how they would be doing, putting in their money. And they just come from individuals who are not also really educated, but they are more of, they have vested interest. So I suggest that in schools, even if it's in a medical profession, there has to be an integration of financial literacy, like talking about, the investment, the insurance, or whatever it is, that we will actually go back to the family. So that's just my insight.
I mean, $27 billion attracts a lot of scammers.
Yes, true.
and that is to be expected. And through OWA or through the Department of Labor, by the way, you should credit the Department of Labor, because last year we did not have a single strike in the country. And so far today we have not had it. So it's been industrial peace. They've been on the watch for, they're very creative. In fact, they don't wait for you to come here. They go out there and seek you out and offer you all sorts of schemes to make more money. It's been very difficult for government to regulate it, because there are quite a number that are legitimate. It's the few who are illegitimate who manage to perpetrate these scams. And every time a single scam happens, it lands in the front page. It's
Oh yes, a big one.
Everyone's doing it, and everyone's suffering from it. And actually, it's not really the case. But as I said, $27 billion. You're bound to have scammers.
It's all big ones.
One need to get a share of that.
Okay, Mary.
Thank you.
Butch, first of all, I would like
In the
to
end, it's uncontrollable.
kindly request your good self to please extend our heartfelt appreciation to you and to the team of President Pinoy for a job well done. Because now we could walk here with pride as Filipino-Americans. Unlike before, para ba nagtatago ka? Kasi ang daming na hindi mo masagot. And I think it is because we have reclaimed the Filipinos, and the Filipinos inside and outside the Philippines have reclaimed their right to be proud of their country because of the changes in national governance. There is a great change. And this change, I think, is the emphasis of the current administration towards the nobility of public service as a public trust. And founded, that value is founded, among others, on transparency. Kita lahat nakikita natin. Ang problema nga ko lang ito, wala yung FOI. And I think, without the FOI, we tend more to rely on the good faith of our public officers to show what is happening in the government. That's good, except that it does not improve the public's obligation that they have to be vigilant on their own and not wait for the sincerity of the public officer in what they're doing. The question is this: what happens to this FOI bill?
Okay, what is happening to our country today really has long historical roots. This is really, I would say, part of the people power continuum. It started in 1983 when somebody got shot at the airport. Who knew he was going to be shot?
Yes.
And has persisted in coming home. It went on to 86. And then somewhere along the line, we sort of got lost. But then we reclaimed it in 2010. So, you know, what you did in 2010 is really part of that historical continuum of people power. And I think it's important for us to always remember that. You know, you don't owe it to anybody, not even to us, not even to President. You know, really, we owe it to ourselves. You know, we stood up there and said, "Tama na, sobra na." You know, and then you know, things began to change. And you know, it's not easy, and that's why if you're not vigilant day to day, we can lose this. And you've seen, you know, what unprecedented gains that you can make if you persist in suffering, sacrificing, and working hard. So this is really our victory, and if at all, we're just simply facilitating it as we are now, you know, managing the government. So, and that's why, for me, it's really critical for you to continue asserting yourselves in 2016, in 2022, in 2028. You know, I firmly believe by the time if you elect a good president, by the time that the next administration and the first half of their term, we would have been able to reduce poverty to single digits. And then you would have a robust middle class that is going to demand more change. You know, I think by the time the next administration's term ends, we would have a robust manufacturing sector. And you know, we'll rebalance to having not just consumption-driven economy, but an economy that's driven by investments and exports, you know, based on creation of real wealth, new wealth, you know. And you know, by the time that there were presidents, that's why I told the president, you know, you should have a team that will guarantee 18 years of good governance. You started at 6 years, you can have 12 more, you know. So now, where is FOI? Well, you know, Dina here is one of the authors of FOI, together with Lenny Robredo and some of her colleagues. The Senate has passed its version of the FOI, and in the House it is soon due for floor deliberation, out of the committee. So there is a good chance that FOI, as promised by the President, will pass before his term ends. But we need to hear from you that this is something that's important for us, and so we need to continue to make noise so that you know, people in Congress are reminded that we are not simply preoccupied by Chinese incursions, but also we are watching FOI and how it's proceeding. That's also an important measure.
Read them off in front.
Mr. Secretary, my name is Manay from I participated in two issues.
It's not a bill, so.
I participated in 2 medical dental missions in the Philippines. I'm not a nurse, but I encountered nurses there who were part of these NDPs, or the Nursing Development Program. Who they are the nurses who receive basic salary. The basic salary, no other benefits. Their contracts are renewed every 6 months, and they have no tenure. What does the government do with so many nurses who are graduating from colleges and universities? Number 2 question is, how are the SWS and your department work together with the figures? Because I see in your figure here, 25.8 is the poverty level in the Philippines, where actually in the ground of the social weather services, they have 4 out of 10 Filipinos declare themselves. That's declaring themselves.
That's called self-rated. It's called self-rated poverty. This one is you go out there and do the survey.
Yeah, but those are the actual response from the ground.
Yeah. Well, you see, the problem with self-rated poverty is when you have reached another level a standard of living,
Yeah.
you never really feel that you continue to feel poor, although it's really in relative terms. You know. So the more accurate measure is really for these sample surveys being conducted by credible polling agencies like social weather stations, and you know, they use it and compare them with benchmarks of the Philippine Statistical Authority. So, I mean, statistically, SWS should be the the Philippine Statistical Authority's numbers should be more reliable. In fact, you know, we could have done better in terms of reducing poverty in 2014, except for, you know, our food policy, particularly our rice policy. It's one of those departments that's very hard to crack, but we're making a lot of headway, because, you know, poverty went down from 27.9 to 24.9 in 2013. That's 3% reduction, which is up in absolute terms is equal to about 2,500,000 Filipinos out of poverty. You know, in 2014, the per capita income of the lowest 40% income earners actually went up by 7%. You know, the income per capita increase of those with higher incomes, about 30%, went up only by about 4 to 5%, which would indicate to you that the growth has been inclusive, because it has benefited the poor people more than the rich people. But then that was sort of erased because of high food prices. In general, the food prices went up by 9.5%, which is versus, and you know, food constitutes about 20% of the average poor Filipinos' budget for the day. It went up by 9.5%, but rice went up by 12%. You know? So if we, and of course this is our fault, but if we had been able to deal with that problem, then my prediction, which is for poverty to go further down by more than 3%, which is around 20%, by the time we would have left in June 30, it would have been almost according to our MDG target of 15%, which is about, I think I was computing 16%. But then we had this problem, you know. So we will have to deal with that. You know, the problem of the price of rice in the Philippines, the price of rice goes this way, which is about 30 to 40% higher than market, global market. If you look at the price of global market of rice, it goes this way. So we should be better off importing rice, you know,
rather than producing it.
Well, up to a point, maybe 80 to 90% we will produce, but the rest we should import. You know, that's why we need to decouple NFA's regulatory function from its proprietary function. You know, this is the area where the most difficult reforms happen, because the vested interest in the agricultural sector is so strong.
How about the nurses? Yeah, the second question I have is about the nurses.
We have this we have this nursing program where we deploy them. You're correct. There's no tenure.
Yes.
They get a minimum pay, and it's renewed every 6 months. Every 6 months. And this is really a way of accommodating. We have about 245,000 surplus nurses in the country. And in fact, Secretary Chairman Liquanan has already, you know, closed down schools that continue to provide nursing courses, because we don't need nurses anymore. What we need to do is deploy the nurses that we already have, and if you add more nurses, then you just compound your problem. So, well, the thing is, for example, we instituted preschool, you know, and expanded K to 12, and this will require, you know, all sorts of medical services for the school. So, but you know, we have to begin training people to become, we need more welders, we need more masons, we need more statisticians, we need geologists, we need engineers, we need structural engineers. These are the kinds of skills more in the direction of the hard sciences that we need to develop. And K to 12 is critical in this sense because many of our high school students graduate without ever seeing elementary calculus books, and that's why you notice our professionals, when they go, they're doctors or engineers, they go abroad, they have to take 1 or 2 more years of additional courses because our standards are far below international. So that's why K to 12 is important because then we provide what is lacking and what is being sought for by many abroad who would like our graduates, but unfortunately they don't satisfy these educational standards.
Okay, last 5 minutes. And Roger, then we'll wrap up already because
I have to catch the train.
Catch the train and then.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Okay,
No, that's fine.
Okay, sorry. Contact by profession, and I'm with the Philippine-American Chamber of Commerce here in New York. We hosted a trade mission po last year sa Pilipinas, and I just want to share our findings and some of the feedbacks that we got. In realization, when we got there, we learned that there are still a lot of roadblocks as far as setting up business there as a foreign investors. So as the young there's a wave of social entrepreneurs going to the Philippines. So my question is there something in process or initiative to make it, more welcoming, easier for the foreign investors and for the young Philippines coming to the Philippines, to get it set up there and more productive yung visit nila?
The most fundamental impediment to the introduction of new ideas or technology or investment in the Philippines is right in the Constitution itself. Because those who drafted the Constitution had a strong protectionist bias. That old thinking of the past where, we gusto namin solohin yung negosyo dito sa Pilipinas. In those days, you can afford to do it in the days of import substitution. But now, where global finance is important, where you need to get a share of the global export market, that's not possible. But then because of this rigidity, it's very, in fact, you cannot even get into TPP because TPP requires changes in our constitution, which we cannot do right now. So I think part of the, critical tasks of the next administration is already to begin studying, which parts of the Constitution need to be opened up. For example, we have one of the slowest, internet services, and yet we have the highest penetration of, internet use. Simply because there are just two telcos who are providing the service, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to fully utilize, maximize the old technologies that they have so that they can earn more money. And in the meantime, in the meantime, poor consumers like us suffer from long waits. Even if you have a cloud computing system, it's still because the technology is not there. You don't find iconic buildings in the Philippines because foreign architects are prohibited from practicing in our country. In fact, there's one story about the wife of the ADB president, who's Japanese, who is a physicist, and she wanted to volunteer to teach at UP because she wasn't doing much there. But she cannot even volunteer to teach because foreign teachers are prohibited from practicing in the Philippines. That's how we have constricted, our economy because of its protectionist biases. And so, I mean, these are cutting edge. If you don't allow them into the country, we will fall behind, very sharply. So I think that's really one of the reasons why we need to revisit our constitution and to allow new ideas to come into the country.
Okay, Roger.
I'm sorry.
Last question.
Okay.
Secretary, good morning. My name is Roger Alama. I'm the president of the Ateneo Alumni Association of North America. I'm also a structural engineer.
We need you in the Philippines.
I'll be retiring in 2 years. The economic engine of a country is very dependent on the efficient operation of its infrastructure.
That's good.
That's what the lady started when you mentioned about roads, and you also mentioned flood control. Now, I was told, it's one of your friends, that there's a lot of money in the Philippines right now. But yet, when you mentioned that there's only 7.3%, how much was the investment on infrastructure allotted?
5%.
5%
Of GDP.
I don't think that is enough to invest on capital assets and in the infrastructure, especially on roads, bridges, you said flood control, environment, energy, transportation, etc. Even the other communications and water systems and sewage and storage system. Now, even the flood control and the rehabilitation of the Laguna de Bay, which is our largest physical heritage, it is a natural fresh water. And it's so polluted, and silt have been deposited and garbage have been deposited. And Mrs. Ramos started the dredging of the Pasig River a long time ago. Do you think your solution of 5% investment on the capital assets on the infrastructure, that's too low?
Okay. Well, we speak here in relative terms, because you also have to think about the capacity of the bureaucracy to absorb, that amount of money. One of my critical problems now really is absorption. As I said, we are growing faster than we can in fact keep pace with that growth. One of the things that we are confronted with, Dr. Noel just calls this technical deficit. Preparing feasibility studies takes a long time in the Philippines. Preparing approved budget for contracts that then you can put up for bids takes a long time. And that's just planning for procurement. You're not even talking about execution. So, all these years we have admittedly neglected those technical capacities that we need to be able to absorb more projects. In fact, if we had opened up the economy to allow, for example, for these huge infrastructure companies to come in, then I think we can accommodate much more. But just to give you, a magnitude, last year, we were not able to disburse 303 billion pesos of capital outlay programs in the government. That's about 13.3% of the budget, because we could not spend the money. I was really saddened by that until I read I read Indonesia, which had worse problems than us, in terms of absorb. It's really the capacity of your bureaucracy, especially even the private sector. For example, doing forecasting work for rail projects is a very hard undertaking to do. It needs a lot of regression analysis and things like that. So I think the challenge is really how to build that capacity over time so that you can really. I agree, 5% is small compared to the potential of our economy. But if the bureaucracy is unable to absorb that, you're also wasting a lot of money because we are unable to spend 303 billion. In fact, the carryover from the previous years was about 165 billion. So we have about 468 billion pesos worth of old projects that we need to implement this year. Now you put that on top of the existing budget, and you put that on top of PPPs, and then you have to put that on top of 80 billion pesos of Yolanda rehab and reconstruction. It's huge money that's out there that it's going to affect the
problem.
Well, we want structural engineers to come home and help us. No, but seriously, I think we need to develop that capacity both in the public as well as in the private realm because, as I said, we have traffic in the air, we have traffic in the ports, we have traffic on our streets, we have traffic along sidewalks because really there's huge activity going on, and we are unable to keep pace with the development. Well, it's a good problem to have. Thank you very much.
For the next part, can everyone just please sit down? Okay. So the Consul General, I would like to present the